This video is to help you figure out how to go about creating all of the different graphs for the controlling reactions labs that you completed. So we're going to walk through each one of the graphs to show you the basics of how to set it up in your Excel so that you get the proper type of graph. So for the first one, it's about the effective surface area. So that's the Alka-Seltzer lab. And so it's going to be a bar graph is what you're asked to create with the average reaction time. So here I created, in my Excel sheet, I have two columns. I have one titled whole tablet, the other crush tablet, and then I have the time for each one of those reactions, which I got from the classroom data. Um, Now, you can figure out the average by yourself. An alternative way of doing it is to actually have Excel create the average for you. So if you notice down here, and once again, I put surface area, whole tablet, crush tablet, and average reaction time. In order to get the average, I am going to have Excel do a formula. So I hit equals average and then open parentheses, and then I select all of the data, close parentheses, hit enter, and it creates the average for me. Then I can do the same thing here, equals average, select the data that I want, close parentheses, and that is my average. So it saves a little bit of time. You don't have to do the math yourself in the calculator. Excel will just do it for you. I can also make it so that there are fewer decimal points. If I want, by right up here, you notice there's a little arrow. I can move my decimal point in and it will round up the number for me if I want to do that. Okay, so now that I have my whole tablet, crush tablet, and I have my averages, I want to select those two columns, go to insert, and I'm going to insert a 2D column graph. Okay, and you notice at the bottom it puts whole tablet, crush tablet, because I had those headers above the numbers. So I have my bar graph, so that's great. I now need to add in the elements of axis titles. I want a primary horizontal, oops, and I want a primary vertical. Okay, so you'll actually put the titles in here. Make sure to give it a chart title, and then that graph is done. Again, make sure that you think about tails. You have your title, the intervals created by Excel, so that's fine. You have your axes labels. Make sure to include your units. We don't need a legend for this one because it has the title right there, or it has the key underneath each bar. And the scale, again, Excel will take care of the scale. So you just have to make sure to put in your axis titles and your graph, or your graph title. All right, so the next graph that you have to do is the temperature, effective temperature. So this was the iodine clock. This one is going to be a scatter plot. So in order to get it to graph every single data point in the right format, notice I just put all of my data in one straight line. I have all of my cold water data and all of my hot water data in one column under temperature Celsius. And then I have all of my times in seconds in the column right next to it. So I highlight those two columns, including the headers, go to insert, and this time I'm going to choose a scatter plot, do a scatter without the line. Okay, and it has created my scatter plot. Now, there are a couple of additional things I have to add aside from my axis titles, which I'm going to get in right now. Okay, I have my two axis titles. I am going to have to change the chart title to something more scientific and more descriptive. I'm also going to add a trend line. Going to add a linear trend line. Okay, and Excel will take care of making sure that that is in the appropriate spot with the appropriate slope. And I added linear because it is a linear trend. Okay. So then again, I go ahead and modify my axis titles, my graph title. I've got my trend line, and that graph is complete. The last one you're going to have to create is the concentration, the disappearing cross. Now this one is a little bit more involved because there's more data. So I notice I have from your data sheet, okay, there were different ratios of concentration. You can do it here as I've done it as the 0.03, 0.06, 0.09, 0.12, 0.15. So this is the when you had the 40 milliliters of water, 10 milliliters of sodium thiosulfate, 30 milliliters of water, 20 milliliters of sodium thiosulfate, etc., all the way to 50 milliliters of pure sodium thiosulfate. And then I have the times for each one of those concentrations from each group that completed the experiment. What I'm going to do is I'm again going to average those times. So I do equals, average, open parentheses, select the data that I want, close parentheses, and I'm going to show you one more trick. Instead of having to retype that every single time, I can actually grab and drag, and it will automatically take that same formula for each one of these individual columns. So notice this one, if you look up here, it says average L3 to L8. So this is column L3 to L8, so it averaged these numbers. This one averaged M3 to M8, N3 to N8, and O3 to O8, etc. Again, I'm going to retype my header, the 0.03, 0.06, 0.09, 0.12, 0.15. What's most important with Excel is that when you want the number to be considered, you cannot have any type of letter. So even here, when I had time, notice I did not put seconds after my data point. Same with here, no seconds. If you put S, Excel is going to be confused and it's not going to realize it's a data point. So I'm going to take all of those. I'm going to once again insert a scatter plot. Okay, so there's my graph of the average time it took at different concentrations. And then I'm going to add my axes titles just like before. Oops, I got rid of that one. We got axis on my vertical. And then I'm going to add a trend line, but this time notice the curve of the graph. This is an exponential curve, so I'm going to add an exponential trend line. Okay, so then once I add my titles, this graph again will be completed with the proper format and with the proper trend line. Again, you need to make sure that your titles are scientific, that they include units. The unit for concentration is molarity. So in this case, my x-axis is concentration of sodium thiosulfate molarity. Okay, which is moles per liter, which we'll learn more about later. But that should be what your x-axis is labeled. You can label your y-axis yourself, and then again with your graph title, make sure that it is scientific and descriptive.